We all know that Roland Emmerich has a complicated relationship with the planet Earth.
Welcome to Earth.
In that he enjoys seeing it smashed to pieces. But it's those very same Earthlings that he's killing who pay good money for the opportunity to see him do so.
You no good damn.
In 1996, he leveled several US landmarks in Independence Day. 2 years later, he sent Godzilla to stomp all over the buildings and citizens of New York City, as well as the souls of those in the theater.
Dwight, you're a kiss ass. Boom, roasted.
In 2004, he ushered in a new ice age, complete with tornadoes and tidal waves in The Day After Tomorrow. At the time, it seemed that Emmerich had done as much world destroying as he could possibly manage.
More!
And the director was ready to move on to other things, starting with the prehistoric adventure film 10,000 BC. But the extinction of mankind has always proved too tempting a spectacle for Emmerich to move on from. So in 2008, the director embarked on what he thought would be the ultimate end of the world movie. And he might have been right about that. Hope you've got all your doomsday prepping sorted out, because we're going to find out just what happened to 2012.
This is wild. This is really wild.
Emmerich truly did not have plans to do another end-of-the-world disaster movie, but when he discovered the 2012 phenomena, he found it hard to resist.
Only one way, and that's my way. Grim Reaper calling, Judgment Day.
You'll remember back then that there were plenty of websites and books dedicated to the idea that the world was going to end in December of 2012.
The world, as we know it, will soon come to an end.
Based on various interpretations of the Mayan calendar, most of which, proved to be incorrect. Nevertheless, in the years before the actual year 2012, there existed a subset of people who genuinely believed that the Earth would undergo some kind of cataclysmic change simply when the last calendar page flipped. Emmerich became fascinated by the concept, and ironically had always wanted to make a biblical flood movie. Teaming with his Day After Tomorrow and 10,000 BC co-writer Harold Closer, Emmerich embarked on telling a story that pitted a global catastrophe against a ragtag group of humans who hoped to survive certain doom. The story would lean into the moral and political implications of who would live and who would die in such an event if the world's governments were already prepared for it. Unconcerned with what the film's budget would ultimately be, Emmerich and Closer wrote the script without caring if it was doable or not. They simply wrote every wild, ridiculous set piece that they could think of. They knew that it would be an expensive endeavor, but they also knew that there's a market for such a genre. After all, Independence Day made over $800 million worldwide, and Day After Tomorrow made over $500 million.
That's a lot of money.
Once they were finished with the script, in February of 2008, the duo set up a bidding war amongst the studios, something Emmerich had done with his two prior disaster flicks. His process was to let the studio heads read the script and then meet with him in order for both parties to agree on the budget, overall vision, and release strategy for the film. All of the major studios were interested, though some shuddered at the sizable budget. But ultimately Sony, who distributed Emmerich's Godzilla and The Patriot, walked away with the grand prize, committing to a price tag of $200 million. Sony gave 2012 a tentative release date of summer 2009. When it came to casting, Emmerich knew that he wouldn't have to cast A-listers in the lead roles because, as he put it, the movie's the star.
So smile!
Besides, with a $200 million budget, most of that money was going to go towards the enormous amount of visual effects that it would take to sell a convincing Armageddon.
Wake me up before you go, don't leave me hanging on like a yo-yo.
So for the main protagonist, author turned limo driver Jackson Curtis,
It's okay! I'm a limo driver!
Emmerich cast John Cusack, not exactly someone that was known for participating in big-budget spectacles, but appropriate here thanks to his everyman quality.
That's great! Open the goddamn door!
As Adrian, a chief science officer who wrestles with telling the public about the upcoming catastrophe, Emmerich cast Chiwetel Ejiofor after seeing him in his breakout role in Dirty Pretty Things. As an eccentric conspiracy theorist who proves to be right, Woody Harrelson came on board and was allowed to improvise some of his character's more quirky moments.
They said unstable? Unstable.
Emmerich is on the record as saying that Woody demanded that his character's butt crack be visible, which seems like a request that only Woody Harrelson could come up with. I assume there was also plenty of weed on his flyer.
Oh, baby!
Emmerich filled the rest of the cast with reliable character actors, although there was a major change dictated by the political landscape in the US at the time. In the original screenplay, the President of the United States was a woman, modeled after presumptive nominee Hillary Clinton. But when Barack Obama won the 2008 Democratic primary, the character was rewritten to be an African-American man, and Danny Glover was cast.
I'm too old for this shit.
Emmerich would later boast that he was able to assemble a talented ensemble such as this thanks to a quote-unquote really good script. At the time, he admitted that the screenplay for 10,000 BC was a good script at first, but got worse thanks to several compromises that he had to make on it. This time, he promised himself no compromises, that the script that he and Closer wrote would be the one that they would make. Of course, in addition to the cast, the main stars of the film would be the various sequences of mind-boggling devastation that befalls the Earth. With that comes the necessary destruction of several noteworthy landmarks and icons. This time, however, Emmerich intentionally focused on famous religious symbols getting smashed to bits. Such as the Christ the Redeemer statue in Brazil and St. Peter's Basilica in Vatican City. It was Emmerich's contention that it was important for the film's impact if these symbols of faith were destroyed, but not the faith of our protagonists. Emmerich is noted for being anti-organized religion, so this was in keeping with his personal beliefs. That said, he had to pull his punches with one iconic location: Al-Kaaba, the stone structure at the center of the Grand Mosque in Mecca, considered the most important shrine in Islam. Emmerich had planned on destroying the Kaaba as well, but his co-writer Closer advised against it, fearing that the startling image would offend Muslims around the world and prompt a fatwa against the filmmaker.
You got a fucking fatwa! I got a fatwa! You got a fatwa!
After some consideration, Emmerich agreed that it was probably best to avoid risking his life over a disaster movie and scrubbed that particular scene. Of course, other sites were still up for grabs, like the White House, which Emmerich famously blew to smithereens in ID4. While not wanting to repeat himself, Emmerich didn't want the audience to think that he would hesitate to crush one of the world's most iconic buildings once again.
What are the odds?
So he came up with an even more intense way of doing so, by tossing the USS John F. Kennedy at it with the help of a gigantic tidal wave. While most of the visual effects would come courtesy of computer magic, Emmerich relied on practical effects as well to stage his chaos. Whole city blocks built on gimbals were created in order to shake the actors around while they ran here and there, while real cars were tossed down from cables during some of the death-defying escape scenes. Production even created a lava cannon, which would hurl flaming balls at the road during the film's volcanic eruption scene. But that proved to be a little too impractical, not to mention dangerous. Despite how large and expensive the movie was, Emmerich wasn't fazed, saying later that because he'd made several disaster films already, he was very prepared for the making of this epic. And the production was a fairly smooth one, with the majority of the film being shot in Vancouver because of Canadian tax breaks. Shooting on 2012 began in July 2008 and lasted until October of that year. Originally, it had locked down a July 10, 2009 release date, but Sony decided to move it to November 13th in order to maximize its potential, considering the lack of competition from mega-budget action movies that time of the year.
What are you waiting for?
The move also allowed the studio to complete the hefty amount of visual effects work that it took to complete the film. The movie's shifted release date paid off as it turned out, and 2012 opened to a very encouraging $65 million in the States and a whopping $160 million internationally, making it the fourth largest worldwide opening weekend at the time for Sony. And critics were not kind to it, but a filmmaker like Emmerich, and by extension the studio, could not care less about that. Neither did the audience, as the movie wound up making almost $800 million worldwide, more than justifying its big price tag.
Hey, have a safe trip, you little bastards.
The movie suffered some minor controversy before it came out. A viral marketing site called the Institute for Human Continuity popped up before the film's release, and allowed people to register for a lottery that could win them a spot on one of the arcs that sail away at the end of the film with the survivors aboard. The website also offered survival kits and advice for where it claimed were the cataclysmic forces that would destroy Earth in 2012. You could see posters and billboards for the so-called IHC scattered throughout certain cities. There was also a site supposedly run by the Woody Harrelson character who was claiming the world was going to end and no one would survive. Naturally, this alarmed people who stumbled upon these sites, not knowing that they were promoting a big sci-fi tentpole film. One organization in particular was not amused: NASA. An astronomer at the agency stated that he received hundreds of panicked emails asking if NASA had any information about this potential event. And he subsequently warned Sony that some people were taking it way too seriously. He even claimed people were telling him that they were suicidal at the thought of the world ending. For its part, Sony argued that their logo, albeit it's small and at the bottom of the page, made it clear that the site was linked to a fictional movie. Believe it or not, 2012 almost spawned a sequel, which makes sense considering it ends with the perfect setup for the continuing adventures of those who survived the mayhem. Emmerich announced the TV show while doing the press rounds for 2012, but soon after the movie's release, it was revealed that the show was not moving forward. Emmerich claimed that the show, naturally titled 2013, was going to follow the arcs as they arrived in Africa to a hostile nation that was supremely pissed off that it wasn't invited to join the rest of humanity on the super ships. Emmerich said at the time that it was going to be a very political show, and the people he was pitching to were either uncomfortable with the story direction nor the size of the budget. Hence, it was shut down for good.
Before we continue with our video, here's a reminder to click the Store tab on any of our JoBlo channels and browse our collection of the latest and freshest designs in our merch store. Go get you some.
While that TV show could have been interesting for a number of reasons, at least we still have the kinetic madness of 2012. Perhaps Emmerich's best disaster film, which throws logic to the wind and focuses on ridiculous, thrilling action. Say what you will about the man's filmography, but he knows how to destroy a continent or two, and 2012 is almost certainly the high point of his career. And that, my friends, is what happened to 2012.
You heard it first from Scully!
Thank you for clicking on our video, everybody. If you like what you saw here, please make sure you like the video and subscribe and share with your friends who like this sort of content. JoBlo was created by movie fans for movie fans, and we appreciate your support.